January 25th, 1991, 6:47 p.m. EST, Tampa Stadium, Florida. Whitney Houston stands beneath the tunnel's concrete shadows, clutching a microphone that weighs heavier than usual. Above her, 73,813 people wait in a stadium crackling with tension that has nothing to do with football. America is 17 days into the Gulf War. Soldiers are dying in desert sands halfway around the world. And in 91 seconds, Whitney will deliver the most powerful performance of the national anthem in American history. What she doesn't know is that those 91 seconds will transform her from a pop star into a symbol of American resilience, creating a moment so transcendent that it will overshadow every other achievement in her remarkable career. Her decision to have Whitney perform the Star-Spangled Banner at Super Bowl XXV came during the most politically charged moment in recent American history. President George H.W. Bush had launched Operation Desert Storm just 10 days after Christmas, and the country was consumed by anxiety about the first major military conflict since Vietnam. The NFL, typically focused on entertainment spectacle, found itself hosting a sporting event during wartime. America needed healing. America needed hope. America needed Whitney Houston, even if they didn't realize it yet. Her preparation began 3 weeks earlier in a New York recording studio, where Whitney worked with arranger Ricky Minor to craft an arrangement that would honor both the song's military traditions and her gospel-trained vocal power. This wasn't going to be a typical pop rendition. Whitney understood intuitively that the moment required something deeper, something that could speak to both the fear and pride coursing through the American consciousness. But the real pressure came from forces Whitney couldn't control. The FBI had warned of potential terrorist attacks during the Super Bowl, making every public figure a potential target. Security briefings painted scenarios that would terrify anyone, let alone someone about to stand alone in front of 100 million television viewers during a national crisis. The morning of January 25th brings news that intensifies the stadium's already electric atmosphere. Patriot missile batteries are intercepting Scud missiles over Israel. CNN is broadcasting live coverage of bombing raids over Baghdad, and American casualty reports are beginning to filter home. The Super Bowl, traditionally America's most lighthearted national gathering, has become a defiant celebration in the face of international uncertainty. Whitney arrives at Tampa Stadium 4 hours before kickoff, but she's not the confident superstar who normally commands every room she enters. The woman who effortlessly sold millions of records now carries the weight of representing American hope during its darkest moment in decades. Her usual pre-performance rituals, vocal warm-ups, prayer, meditation, take on deeper significance when the stakes extend far beyond entertainment. The security briefing that afternoon reveals the extraordinary measures surrounding her 91-second performance. Secret Service agents will position themselves throughout the stadium. Military snipers will monitor rooftops for miles around Tampa. The airspace above the stadium will be restricted, with fighter jets on standby to intercept any unauthorized aircraft. Whitney Houston isn't just performing the national anthem. She's becoming a symbol worth protecting at the highest levels of government. At 5 p.m., as the Buffalo Bills and New York Giants complete their final preparations, Whitney begins her own countdown. The arrangement she's practiced dozens of times suddenly feels inadequate for the moment history is demanding. This isn't about hitting high notes or showcasing vocal runs. This is about channeling the collective emotions of a nation at war. The tunnel leading to the field becomes her final sanctuary. In those concrete enclosed moments, Whitney transforms from entertainer to vessel. She's not thinking about record sales or career implications. She's processing the letters she's received from military families, the phone calls from soldiers' wives, the responsibility of giving voice to feelings too complex for ordinary conversation. At 6:43 p.m., as Whitney walks onto the Tampa Stadium field, the crowd's response reveals the unique psychological state of the American public. This isn't typical Super Bowl enthusiasm. There's a deeper hunger in their cheers, a desperate need for something that transcends football and reaches toward the sacred. They're not just greeting a pop star, they're welcoming someone who might help them make sense of a confusing and frightening moment in history. The visual of Whitney on that field becomes instantly iconic. A black woman in a white tracksuit, standing alone at midfield, surrounded by an honor guard of military personnel, representing every branch of the armed forces. The symbolism isn't accidental. In a war being fought largely by young men and women from diverse backgrounds, Whitney represents the America they're fighting to protect. The opening notes of her arrangement silence 73,113 people instantly. Whitney's voice, supported by the Florida Orchestra, begins with restraint that builds gradually toward something approaching the divine. She's not performing the national anthem. She's channeling it, allowing the song to flow through her in a way that makes every listener feel personally addressed. "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light," begins not as a question but as a challenge. Whitney's phrasing suggests she's asking every American to look beyond their fears and find the courage that defined their nation's founding. Her vocal control is flawless, but more importantly, her emotional connection to the lyrics transforms familiar words into fresh revelation. The first 30 seconds establish the performance's spiritual foundation. Whitney's voice carries the weight of history, while maintaining intimate connection with each listener. Television cameras capture faces in the crowd. Tough football fans weeping openly. Military personnel standing at perfect attention. Children placing hands over hearts with unprecedented solemnity. But it's at the 40-second mark when Whitney reaches "gave proof through the night that our flag was still there," that the performance transcends entertainment and becomes prayer. Her voice soars into registers that shouldn't be possible while maintaining perfect diction, perfect emotion, perfect connection to the song's deepest meaning. The crowd realizes they're witnessing something beyond typical Super Bowl pageantry. The arrangement's key change at minute 120 creates the performance's emotional climax. When Whitney delivers "Land of the Free," her voice reaches toward heaven while remaining grounded in earthly emotion. The vocal runs that follow aren't showboating. They're spiritual ecstasy, the sound of someone so moved by their own message that technique becomes secondary to truth. The final phrase, "Home of the Brave," becomes Whitney's gift to every American watching. Her voice carries both vulnerability and strength, acknowledging the fear everyone feels while celebrating the courage required to face uncertainty together. The sustained final note doesn't just demonstrate vocal power, it becomes a prayer for national endurance. When Whitney concludes after exactly 91 seconds, the stadium erupts in a way that transcends typical applause. This is cathartic release, collective gratitude, and patriotic celebration merged into a single moment of national unity. Military flyovers scheduled to impress become emotional punctuation marks for a performance that has already lifted everyone present above their ordinary concerns. But the true measure of Whitney's achievement becomes clear in the hours and days following the Super Bowl. Radio stations begin playing her performance on repeat, not as a novelty, but as a source of comfort for listeners struggling with wartime anxiety. The recording, initially intended as a standard Super Bowl memento, becomes a genuine hit single, the only national anthem performance ever to reach the top 20 on the Billboard Hot 100. More significantly, Whitney's performance becomes the template for how America processes collective trauma through shared cultural experience. In an era before social media, her 91 seconds create a moment of genuine national unity that crosses racial, political, and regional boundaries. For once, all Americans can agree on something: They've just witnessed greatness in service of something greater than entertainment. The performance's political impact extends far beyond the immediate moment. Whitney Houston, already one of America's biggest stars, becomes something more valuable, a symbol of what America can achieve when it transcends division and speaks with one voice. Her success represents proof that the American dream, however complicated, still has power to inspire and unite. Military personnel stationed in the Persian Gulf receive copies of Whitney's performance, and their testimonies reveal the song's power to sustain morale during impossible circumstances. Soldiers write letters describing how her voice reminds them of home, family, and the values they're fighting to protect. Whitney hasn't just performed for America, she's performed America for Americans who need reminding of their nation's spiritual foundation. The recording session for the single, completed weeks before the Super Bowl, captures Whitney at the absolute peak of her powers. Her voice navigates the song's demanding range with ease, while conveying emotions that feel both personal and universal. The orchestral arrangement conducted by Ricky Minor provides the perfect framework for Whitney's interpretation without overwhelming her vocals. But the studio recording, however beautiful, cannot capture the electricity of that Tampa Stadium moment. The live performance contains elements that studio perfection cannot replicate. The collective intake of breath from 73,113 people, the weight of national crisis, the spiritual connection between performer and audience that transforms entertainment into ritual. January 25, 1991, becomes the night Whitney Houston stops being merely successful and becomes historically significant. Her 91-second performance proves that popular music, at its highest level, can serve purposes beyond commerce and self-expression. She demonstrates that great artists don't just reflect their times, they help their times find meaning and transcendence. The performance's legacy endures because it captures something uniquely American: the ability to transform individual excellence into collective inspiration. Whitney's voice becomes the vessel through which millions of people experience patriotism, not as political ideology, but as shared emotional reality. Today, when America faces moments of division and uncertainty, Whitney's Super Bowl performance continues to provide a template for unity. Her 91 seconds remind us that great art can temporarily heal political wounds and create spaces where all Americans can stand together, if only for the length of one perfect song. In those 91 seconds, Whitney Houston didn't just sing the national anthem, she became it, transforming Francis Scott Key's words into a prayer that still echoes whenever America needs reminding of what it can achieve when it speaks with one voice. The Gulf War ended. The Super Bowl was won and forgotten. But Whitney's 91 seconds remain eternal, a moment when American popular culture achieved something approaching the sacred and reminded a nation why it was worth defending.